Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So I finished my ride on the Central Lakes State Trail. It's a rail trail. It's actually 55 miles in length. I only did about half of it. No, I'm joking. I didn't go that far. Because I told the guys I would be gone for like an hour. So I think I did about 12 and a half, 13 miles. Which is good enough because it's a little bit chilly and I don't have all my winter cycling stuff. And, excuse me, I'm here with a recovery beverage. And also, I wasn't wearing cycling shorts or pants. And so if you cycle, you know what I mean. But it's a nice paved trail, 55 miles. So that would be, I mean, that would be a great couple of days of riding if you wanted to stop somewhere and, you know, stay overnight, or you could just go like balls to the walls and ride out and back all in one day. Which in the summertime wouldn't be bad. 110 miles, it's not that bad in the summer. It's pretty flat. So it would be, I think it would be pretty enjoyable. You'd have to, yeah, I think that would be fun in the summer, just out and back, just kill it. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about some stuff, just some kind of catch up on some things that I've talked about. So I got some feedback on the, so let me talk about this first. So there's an outfit that has tried to limit the amount of time or distance that people can go on personal conveyance. And I think they're called Trucker Alliance or something, which is an odd title because they're basically like, hey, you know, you got to rein in this personal conveyance stuff, blah, 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 because their theory is, well, you could drive for 8 hours and then be done and then PC wherever you wanted to. But the FMCSA is basically like, nah, we're not going to change it. And by the way, I think they asked for this change back in 2020 also, because they don't like it that it's unlimited. But I don't think there's a ton of evidence that people are driving like for, you know, like 11 hours and then, you know, bobtailing from like Las Vegas to Salt Lake City to go home. I mean, I guess it could happen and it would be legal, right? But it's, you know, FMCSA is not going to change it. The other interesting thing that I've read just the other day, or actually yesterday, was about drug testing. And this kind of goes to like people that are applying and stuff. And you know, over the years, I've had people ask in comments, you know, does such and such a company do hair follicle drug testing? And, you know, initially my reaction has always been, why do you care? Like, if you're clean, right? You should piss clean and, you know, test clean follicularly. Is that a word? Anyway, but in doing a little more research on hair follicle drug testing, it turns out that certain people, and this has to do with hair color and maybe hair composition, could have a false positive test just because of that, like what they're testing for. The other, and then when I was reading about kind of the science behind this, I was like, well, what if you know, like, what if there's something in like the deodorant that you use? Because when I have had hair follicle drug tests, Night Transportation did them when I was hired. I don't know if they still do. And so they, you know, I don't have facial hair, and I mean, I do have, you know, I do have other body hair, but they took some of my like armpit hair, and I was like, all right, whatever floats your boat. But I was like, well, what if you use deodorant that's like I don't know, all natural, and it has like hemp in it or something, and so it shows up as THC or something, or CBD. I don't know. And I'm not an expert on this, and so FMCSA is basically like, hey, we're not going to. And by the way, if you didn't know this, hair follicle drug testing the results of it cannot be reported to the clearinghouse. The only acceptable testing is either urine or spit. Although I've never been asked to spit, I think it's 100% of the time it's going to be urine testing. So only urine testing. But this outfit that, some safety people, they're like, oh, well, there have been, because there are companies like Knight that do hair follicle drug testing, and they use it to basically exclude people. And so what they're this advocacy group was saying was, hey, there have been 5,278 people denied employment from companies that do hair follicle drug testing, and in no instance did anybody try to dispute the findings of the hair follicle drug test. And I think OOIDA was, their comment was that in fact, when I read that, I was like, that doesn't prove anything. And then I further read in the article, and OOIDA basically said that doesn't prove anything, because the technology is not reliable enough that the government is willing to put that on somebody's record. But the other thing that is also the case is that these people may have opted not to go to that company anyway, because a lot of people apply to several companies at a time, because in fact, if you use 10th Street, it's possible to like shotgun your application to like 20 companies simultaneously if you check a bunch of boxes. So anyway, I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon. I will say this, and I kind of agree with this premise, anecdotally, based on anecdotal evidence. They're like, hey, there's a problem with drug use in the trucking industry. And my response to that is, you're probably right. And the reason I say that is because you'd be surprised, if you probably wouldn't, at how many times truckers get in accidents and then they're found to be like stoned, on meth, you name it, right? And or have the shit in their truck, and that doesn't even take into account the truckers caught smuggling drugs. So would I say there's a problem? I mean, if the idea is to have zero truck drivers, like snorting meth, then yeah, there probably is a problem in the industry. I'm sure there are people that are addicted to opioids in the industry. It would be shocking if there aren't. But then again, there's a significant percentage of lawyers that use cocaine and opioids and stuff. I mean, the ABA, when I was practicing, acknowledged that, because they've done surveys where lawyers are asked, do you use illicit drugs? And, and they even asked what drugs, and people in anonymous surveys admitted to using like cocaine and, stuff like that. So it's everywhere, right? And it's naive to think it's not. So anyway, that's kind of an update on that. But I wanted to talk about a couple of other interesting kind of like legal things that and I'll circle back to trucking here. So if you're familiar with the Serial podcast, which kind of started the whole like true crime podcast phenomena, and some of them are just like crazy good. I told you my wife's always trying to figure out how to kill me. She listens to them all the time, and she's always trying to like find the ones where the wife kills the husband and stuff. But I mean, it's a truism that when the wife kills the husband and it ends up on a podcast, she must have got caught, right? So I tell my wife, you're wasting your time. All these women got caught. And she's like, yeah, but if I figure out how all of them got caught, maybe I can like find the like magic formula to not get caught. I'm like, okay, good luck. But anyway, so the Serial podcast, its very first case was the Adnan Syed case in Baltimore, Baltimore County, Baltimore City. And he was just released from prison recently, and this week, the Baltimore City State's attorney dropped all charges against him. Now, he did 23 years in jail. And, you know, it's one of those cases where, you know, it points up the fact that in this country, a lot of people end up in jail, and we know this, who are not guilty of the crimes that they were charged with. Now, I want to make sure people understand the term not guilty. It doesn't mean they're innocent, okay? Not guilty is a legal conclusion, right? Innocence is not the conclusion of a court, a criminal court, or the trier of fact. Trier of fact could be the judge or a jury, either one. Okay? So I want to be clear about that. But everybody in this country, regardless of their age or their race or their religion or how much money they have, you know, is entitled to a trial that's fair, right? And in the law, there are certain demands that are placed on prosecutors. And if prosecutors violate those demands of the law, then that trial is tainted. I don't even care if, you know, there are 20 witnesses that the person killed somebody. You know, if prosecutors violate the rules, then that trial is tainted. I'm not saying the person shouldn't be tried again, but when prosecutors misbehave, and I include in prosecutorial misconduct knowingly allowing police officers, for example, to lie on the stand, or witnesses to lie on the stand. There are very specific rules about how you can talk to witnesses. Like, you can't coach a witness on what to say, but it happens all the time. And there are famous instances, like there was an NYPD detective who had like 19 murder convictions, and the exact same prostitute testified in each trial. Right? Like this woman witnessed, you know, more murders than Bonnie and Clyde. I mean, it was just insane. Well, of course, you know, he was paying this woman, and I don't know that there wasn't an illicit relationship somehow, but he was basically hooking her up with something, whether it was money or not arresting her or drugs or something. Sorry, there's a train going by, so I'm kind of like distracted because you know how I love my trains. You know, the odds of her witnessing and being able to testify in 19 murder cases are basically zero. Okay, so anyway, I want to focus on that idea for a second, and you know, go back and talk about the O.J. Simpson case. And you know, for a long time, right? Because I watched a lot of that trial, and I was talking to somebody about it recently. But I think it's important because not because of necessarily the outcome, but because of how people reacted to it, and how people totally misinterpret how the law is supposed to work. Like, they're American citizens, but they don't really know how courts work. So let me give you two takes on this. When OJ and by the way, I watched a lot of the trial, and in particular, I know a lot of people focused like on Johnny Cochran and if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. But I'm here to tell you that Johnny Cochran was, in my opinion, was not the lawyer that got OJ acquitted. The lawyer who got OJ acquitted was a guy named Barry Scheck. And Barry Scheck runs this thing called the Innocence Project, and he and his folks have gotten a lot of innocent people out of prison, a lot of them, and they do good work because they basically keep, they're a check on the system, and and we know the system is not what it's supposed to be. Excuse me. So one of the things that Barry Scheck did is he cross-examined this guy named Dennis Fung during the trial, and Dennis Fung was what is called a criminalist, and he's the guy on the Los Angeles Police Department. He's not a cop, but he's not a law enforcement officer. He's a guy that gathers evidence. He's crime scene, and his job title is criminalist. And Barry Scheck just destroyed the case forensically. Because if you'll remember, there were all these different things, blood evidence and drops here and drops there and stuff like that, right? From the crime scene in OJ's house, blah, 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 right? But Barry Scheck, it's a clinic in establishing reasonable doubt. It's just that. This guy, Dennis Fung, was an experienced criminalist. I'm sure he had testified in several trials. And Barry Scheck made him look like a fourth grader. Like he didn't know jack. And the funny thing is that I have a friend who is now retired. She's a retired police officer, and she was a detective for many, many years. Not in Los Angeles. Although I do know people that were on the LAPD at the time and who know many of the police officers that testified. But anyway, my friend, who's African American, said she thought that they were going to have trouble convicting OJ right from Jump Street. And the reason was, and this is interesting that she would say that, they, meaning the police, treated OJ differently than they would have any other murder suspect. And indeed they did, and so you see what happened. Now, I think O.J. Simpson killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. And just as an aside, I met Fred Goldman one time. We did not talk anything about this, but I met him one time in Arizona. And anyway, when the verdict came out, right, I wasn't surprised. Now, African American people celebrated, right? But I think their celebration was misguided, because honestly, there are thousands of African Americans who are falsely accused, and people like Barry Scheck get them out of prison, a lot of times, and as well he should. But OJ was not innocent. He was also not guilty, okay? And remember I said not guilty is a legal conclusion, right? Based on the evidence, right? Based on that standard. But so I think that black people, and by the way, I'm totally generalizing, because people like Steve Harvey, I love Steve Harvey, but he came out, he's like, oh yeah, he did it. It's on YouTube. And I don't think there's, I don't think anybody that's like a fairly clear thinker is going to be like, yeah, no, he was framed. He was framed. But the interesting thing is, right, like, I think that the jury reached the correct outcome in that case. And the reason is because there was reasonable doubt. If you go through the trial transcripts, I guarantee you'd be like, yeah, that's the definition. Like I said about Scheck, he created the textbook definition of reasonable doubt, okay? And, you know, shame on the prosecution for not getting it right. Shame on the police for not getting it right. You know, OJ had a great defense team, you know. Lots of people don't have that. So anyway, let's just segue into stuff that's in the news now. So I was reading some things the other day, and I'm like, and this is, and by the way, I'm not saying this for any like political reasons. It's just intriguing, right? But I will say this: our 45th president really, really, really needs some better lawyers. I mean, I'm sorry, but I will be shocked because, so you know the FBI executed a search warrant on the Mar-a-Lago property, and you know, I'll tell you straight up, it's not, you know, a federal judge issuing a search warrant for that property would have had to have a fair amount of convincing that it was warranted. Okay. This is not some, oh yeah, a drug informant told me they're selling drugs out of this house, we need to kick the door in. Okay. And some judge just signs off on it. No. I'm fairly certain the bar was high. But here's the interesting thing. Like, I saw those documents with all those classification cover sheets. You know, so like when you have a classified document, right, there's a sheet that goes over the top of it. So no one who doesn't have clearance can accidentally pick it up and start reading it and learn it's classified. Like, it tells you that you can't even see this, like, it's classified. There's no doubt about it, right? And all that shit all over the floor. I'm just like, that's crazy. It's crazy, right? And by the way, you know, the president can declassify stuff, but there's a process, right? Like, first of all, you can't just think it. But second of all, there is a process. Like, you have to tell, if we got the information from another government, for example, we have to tell that other government that we intend to declassify it. Like, that's the agreement that's in place. And breaching those agreements is a huge, huge deal. It's a huge deal, right? And so anyway, but forget about whether or not there's been a mishandling of classified information or conspiracy to commit espionage or whatever. Something jumped out at me the other day, right? Two things, actually. A lawyer told somebody that he was told to tell the National Archives that they had gotten back everything that they wanted. Well, if it's a crime to not return classified information to the National Archives once an administration is over, then telling somebody to lie to them is obstruction of justice. And even probably more of a solid obstruction case is somebody, I think some aide said that they were told to, they were basically told to misrepresent things to the FBI. And obstruction of justice at the federal level is one of the easiest things to get caught up in. And I know this not from personal experience per se, but I've seen cases, you know, along the way. And I'm super cognizant of it because I've been interviewed multiple times by the FBI, by Treasury agents, by U.S. Postal inspectors, and you know, U.S. attorneys, assistant U.S. attorneys, probably half a dozen times. And, you know, even my friends that were lawyers were like, hey, be really careful about what you say. And, you know, so like if I didn't know something for certain, I'd be like, I don't remember, you know. And you know, you can't talk, you know, if there's any kind of criminal investigation going on, anybody, and this, I'm just going to give you this advice if it ever comes to you, but you can't go to anybody that's going to be interviewed and say, hey, why don't you just forget about that? Because if that's found out, right, even if the testimony that even if the person that's interviewed then tells the 100% truth, so they don't do anything that you suggested, you've still committed a felony. So like you could be totally like innocent of, you know, like you could have been unindictable for anything, but by just saying that, you actually committed a felony. And the thing is, I'm telling you this about law enforcement, especially federal law enforcement. They don't usually, you know, they don't ask questions they don't already have the answers to, especially like U.S. attorneys. So I would say look for it. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I will be shocked if Trump is not indicted for something. And I think some people around him are going to get in. I think they're going to be indicted, or at least named as unindicted co-conspirators, and a bunch of people are going to testify against him to stay out of jail. Because, you know, I don't care. I don't care. You know, if you've been to jail, any day in jail is not a good day. So, and you look at some of the federal sentencing guidelines for some of these crimes, they're not short. They're not short. So I'm guessing there's a lot of people that are gonna make a deal. They're gonna come clean. They're not gonna go to jail for this. So anyway, that's one observation. But let me give you one other thing real quick. So I talked about winter driving and stuff, and my friend Lyle's talked about that stuff. He had a video the other day about it. But here's something that when I was at night, their safety department was pretty good about stressing stuff like this. But a lot of truck drivers get hurt outside the truck in the wintertime, slipping and falling. Whether it's slipping and falling out of trailers, or, you know, walking across a parking lot, or I could tell you one place that you will all find ice a lot is in between parked trailers, where a bunch of trailers have been parked, and they're like, oh yeah, go hook that empty or drop this, you know. And even in parking lots that are dirt, there could be a sheet of ice on them because water's melted and then refrozen. At night, at nighttime, not at night trucking, you know, it's really easy to slip and fall in between trailers. So if this is your first year, the first winter, and you haven't, you know, you're not used to that, there are boot spikes that you can buy, and you can put them on over a pair of sneakers. They fit better over boots, but they're just little treads, so that when you, because honestly, I've got, and here's the other thing: when you get out of the truck, make sure you don't let go of the handles or the door or whatever you got a hold of until you're sure that you're not stepping onto a hockey rink. Because it's really easy to fall and hurt yourself. And I can tell you right now, you are not going to hit your body, and your head and whatever else is out there is not going to hit anything that's not hard, okay? I don't care whether it's a sheet of ice. I don't care if it's another trailer, the landing gear, the steps on your truck, the tires on a trailer, wherever you fall, if you hit something, it's going to be hard, okay? It's really easy to get hurt. The other thing is, night at least, because we would get lists of, you know, how truckers got hurt and stuff. A lot of times, slip and falls on steps going into and out of receivers and stuff. Be careful on those. But let me say this: if you get hurt, you have to let safety know. You have to let dispatch know right away that you've been hurt, and they'll start a workers' comp claim. You have to do what they say for the workers' comp. So like if they send you to a clinic, you got to go there. Even if you want to go to your own doctor, you still got to go to their clinic and stuff like that. And here's the thing: don't confuse a workers' comp claim with a negligence claim against a shipper or receiver. So like if you're delivering a load and it's snowed and there's, they didn't do anything to clear any parking lot and stuff, they didn't clear the steps off, and you get hurt on their property, you can bring a lawsuit against them, right? They have in almost any state, because you're what is called a business invitee, they have an legal obligation to make sure you don't get hurt on their property. And if you do, and it's through their negligence, then, they have to compensate you. Now you can't, you got to take care of stuff the right way yourself too.
Hey, so